Welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, right here in Canton, Ohio, the most inspiring place on earth. My name is Jake Wright. I'm the Youth and Education Manager here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and we're excited to bring you another installment of our Before the Snap series. Today, featuring the CFO, which, if you know acronyms, fairly important one, for the Baltimore Ravens, Jeff Goering. And we'll get to him in a second. But for those of you who might be tuning into this program for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about what it is. Before the Snap is a great program centered around discovering all the great careers in and around the NFL. Today, we're focusing on the finance, the HR, the IT side of things. Other programs, we've looked at community relations, football operations, marketing, social media, all with the goal to showcase that there are so many great and unique careers out there. If you love sports, there's a chance for you to work in that field with a sports organization. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, if you've tuned in with us before, thank you so much for doing so. You guys are in store for another excellent program. A little bit about us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Our mission is to honor the heroes of the game, to preserve its history, to promote its values, and to celebrate excellence everywhere. And those values we promote are those of commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and excellence, all of which not only make football players great or even Hall of Famers, but they make good people great and great people excellent. They make you great members of your community, and truly they make you great employees. So I'm excited to hear how these values, and you'll hear them come up through a lot of the things we talk about today, how important they are to the day-to-day life of somebody who works in an NFL organization, and even for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, before we do get started, just want to send out some quick thank yous. First off, Mr. Goering, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the program today. And taking time out of your busy schedule. I know it's a busy time for you, but to talk to us and to talk to students truly all across the country about your career. Some of the things we'll talk about, the fans see the final product on Sunday or Monday, or last week, it was any day of the week. But the fans see that final product, but we want to showcase all the work behind the scenes that makes that snap go off, that opening kickoff happens. That's why we call this before the snap. So thank you so much for that, for all you do for the game and all you indirectly you do for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Secondly, I'd like to thank our teachers and administrators, professors, educators, anybody who allowed us to come into your classroom today to help your students learn a little bit about different careers in and around the NFL. We know this school year has been a crazy one, and we're excited to just be a small part of your class today and of your learning atmosphere. And then lastly, I got to thank those students. Without the students participating today, we could not have this program. So all of our students tuning in today, whether you're a high school student, a college student, or maybe even a young professional like myself, tuning in today to learn a little bit more about careers in and around the NFL. Since you are watching, we want to know where you're watching from. Comment, what school are you at? Where are you coming to us from? Where you're watching from, let us know. We want to see how far across the country we would get. So throw your school name in there, and let's see where you're coming from here today. And if you want to ask a question, you're going to have the opportunity to. All you got to do is put your name, your school, and your question in the comment section. And Nathan, who you guys have seen many times before, he's out there watching now. His setup looks a little different today. We had to adjust on the fly. As the quarterback said, we had to call an audible. But we have him ready and watching all those Facebook questions as well. So make sure you are putting all your questions in there, and we'll try our best to make them a part of the program. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our special guest today, Mr. Jeff Goering. Now, Jeff Goering is he joined the Baltimore Ravens in 1999 and oversees the Ravens finance, human resources, and information technology departments. In terms of financial operations, he leads strategic planning, budgeting, financial reporting, tax, and audit processes, which might sound, I'm not going to lie, probably sounds a little boring, but is very, very, very important for any organization. He also serves as the primary financial liaison with the Maryland Stadium Authority, working with various stadium contractors and event promoters. Prior to being named VP of Finance in 2015, he served as the Ravens VP of Finance and Chief Financial Officer from 2008 to 2014. Previously, at PricewaterhouseCoopers, he is senior consultant in Dallas, Texas. He worked with many sport entities preparing financial feasibility studies, market assessments, economic impact studies, analysis for proposed or new expanded sports venues. He received his Master's of Science in Sport Management from the University of Massachusetts in 1998. During that time, he also served as a consultant in the evaluation and preparation of Boston Red Sox salary arbitration cases. So, awesome bio, a lot of cool stuff we get to unpack today. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Goering to the program today. Jeff, thank you so much for being a part of the program.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I have a college student at the University of Tampa, and I have two high school students. So I talk to students on a regular basis, meeting my own 3 students, and I'm happy to talk with the students today. I hope you're all doing well out there.
Well, thank you for that. I want to echo that. I hope everybody is doing well as well. So to start everything out, we read through your bio, some of the things you do on a day-to-day basis, but the chief financial officer, CFO, obviously there's so much under that umbrella. So for you, normal day-to-day life, what does the CFO of the Baltimore Ravens do?
Well, the chief financial officer is kind of what it sounds, managing the day-to-day finances of the entire organization. So that you're managing the inflows, so your ticket money coming in, your sponsorship money coming in, but also your outflows. And most of the time, the one outflow that people are going to kind of understand the most would be the player compensation. So we are involved, of course, with the payments going out to the players, in addition to the payments to the staff. And in some organizations, the CFO is simply in that role of finance. In my particular spot, I'm fortunate enough to also have involvement with the IT group and with our HR group. So at some point here, I can share with you kind of how I got to where I am today, but then I also have a lot of practical tips I want to share with the listeners too.
Yeah, let's dive into that. Before we dive in, because this is made to showcase all the different things to help these college students prepare for life after school. Something I wish I had when I was in school, a program like this to learn. But before we dive into that, let's kind of talk about that trail to where you are today. Some of the other jobs you had, and maybe how those jobs help you prepare for where you are today.
Okay. So I'm a Midwesterner. I grew up in Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, until I got to high school. And then my family moved to McPherson, Kansas. So I went to high school in Kansas. I have always had an active interest in sports. I was a basketball and baseball player, ironically, not football. I was recruited to play both basketball and baseball in college, and I chose to play basketball. And I graduated from Rockhurst University in Kansas City. So I graduated from Rockhurst. Honestly, I really didn't have a career path in mind. I do feel like I'm a fairly ambitious and driven person, but for whatever reason, I wasn't pursuing a particular career path. At the time, when I was in college, I wasn't even really familiar that I could be an executive with a professional team. I just didn't put 2 and 2 together for whatever reason. So the job I took coming out of college was as an auditor at a public accounting firm, which we can talk a little bit later about for you accounting students, the options of going into public accounting as opposed to private accounting. But so for right now, I went to Ernst & Young, now referred to as EY, but I was an auditor there. So my job was to go out to different companies and audit or check their books and records to make sure they're accurate. So I did that for 4 years. And while I was at E&Y, at Ernst & Young, I saw a newsletter, a company newsletter, and it said, Ernst & Young does the audit of the NFL salary cap. I was like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty interesting. So I called up that office and said, do you guys need help with your audit of the salary cap? And I think I could hear like a laugh on the other end of the phone, like, no, we're all good. We've got it covered. But it got the wheels kind of started in my mind as to, okay, well, maybe I should try to merge this accounting experience that I have and my interest in sports. So how do I go about doing that? And I concluded that the best way to do it was to go back and get a master's degree in sports management. So some of you students may be already in sports management and are kind of following that career path, which is great. Others of you who may be pursuing a different degree, you do have the option of going and getting a graduate degree in sports management, which is what I did. So I went to the University of Massachusetts, got my graduate degree in sports management, had some good experiences there. like Jake mentioned, the salary arbitration cases with the Boston Red Sox. So got some great experience. And I remember being in the class there at UMass, and they have sports marketing and sports management and sports finance and sports law. And I loved it. It was right down my alley. But one of the classes, you had to identify what are your top career choices. You have to put them on this little note card, 1, 2, and 3. And I put 3, I wanted to be a sports financial consultant. 2 would be an associate athletic director at a university. And 1 would be to be a CFO at a sports franchise. Well, I didn't get the number 1 right off the bat, but I did get the third one. So I went to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers. They had a small group that did team valuations, financial feasibility studies, and that type of thing, assisting professional teams with their financial issues. So I got that job. And then the Baltimore Ravens were undergoing some financial distress at the time, and they hired consultants to come help them. And I was one of the consultants that came to help the Ravens. That's how I got to know the people at the Ravens. Their person in the finance department left. He's actually still in the NFL, just with another team, but he left. It opened up a position for me at the Ravens. And they said, who can we hire to come into our finance department? Hey, how about that consultant guy that's been around for the last 6 months asking questions and putting together a consulting report on how we can improve our operations? Let's see if he's interested. I said yes. And that was over 20 years ago. And that's how I got to the job at the Ravens.
That's a great story. And truly, everybody we've talked to, their path has been different. Whether it's, right out of college, they're into the career they're in now. There's 17 different steps to get where they are. And I think that's the cool thing about sports and a career in sports is that there's so many different career paths you can do. It's almost like you get a job, but you still kind of have that dream that you want in the back of your mind. And you're always continuing to try and find that until you end up there. I know Nathan's got a great question here. We're going to throw it out to Nathan. It has to deal with kind of your journey to where you got to where you are now with the Ravens. So Nathan, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Yeah, Jake, thank you so much for sending it here. And before I ask my question, I got to encourage the students. I saw several of you guys put, where you're watching from. Please submit your questions. We love asking your questions. Personal bias. I don't want to listen to Jake ask questions. We want to hear your questions today. So please submit your questions. But this is a personal question coming from me. When we were doing our research, Mr. Goering, and I was kind of reading what you had done. I know we're the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I know we like to stay focused on football, but personally, I got to know, what was that experience while you were in grad school working with the Red Sox and those arbitration cases with the players? What was that like? Could you give us a little bit more detail on, how your accounting and your finance experience helped with that while you're getting your master's in sports management?
Yeah, sure. So the Boston Red Sox hired our professor to represent them with their salary arbitration cases. So for those who aren't familiar with salary arbitration in baseball, it's basically a negotiation between the players or an individual player and the team as to how much that particular player will be paid for the upcoming year, for the upcoming season. So it's a highly statistical analysis. So you look at the statistics of the player from the last year and from the previous years, and you compare that player to other players with similar characteristics. So you compare the compensation to your player compared to the compensation for these other players with similar statistics. So the team does it. We were doing it on behalf of the team. And then the player's agent also does it. And so you have two cases, two kind of arguments that are presented to a judge or a panel of judges who then have to make the decision as to which compensation number to choose, either the player's number or the team's number. So that, it might be $2 million. The player may be asking for $2 million and the team may say at 1.5 million, for example. So the background in accounting and just mathematics in general and working with the statistical information came in handy, I think, in the evaluation process. And it's interesting, there were 2 other guys with me that were grad students that worked on the project. One of them is Chris Antonetti, who's now the president of the Cleveland Indians. So obviously a great guy, got to know him well during the process.
Wow. Wow. Chris Antonetti, I'm a big Indians fan, so that's exciting to hear that you've got that connection. And before I send it back to Jake, students, please submit those questions. I see you guys are still putting in the comments, but we want to hear from you guys today. But I'm going to send it back to Jake for more questions because we are the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I can't sit here and talk about baseball for the next half hour. So Jake, back to you.
All right, thanks, Nathan. Yeah, awesome story. And I think it's another way that sports is so unique. You know, you've gone through all these different experiences and working in so many different areas throughout the country. You settle in Baltimore with the Ravens, an NFL organization, but you know, you've built relationships with people who are now leading MLB organizations. So very, very cool, and very cool how sports can kind of work cross-curricular. And, you know, talking about your career and all the different things, you know, along your path. You mentioned you knew you loved sports, and you knew you had a passion for math, accounting, the finance side of things, and you were able to merge those two careers together. So for somebody who might be still kind of raw or young in their career, that really doesn't have an idea of what they want to do, but they know that they like A, B, and C, what would some advice or what would some tips that you would give to them to kind of help them realize that, all right, this is the path I need to go down because these are the things that I'm interested in?
Okay. So yeah, here's a couple of ideas. One, I think I would say read and research. I've always been a pretty voracious reader. You know, information is so important. This day, information is so available. It's great. Back when I was in college, I would read the Kansas City Star and the USA Today pretty much every day. I read the news so much that my roommates nicknamed me CNN. But I think that reading is key. Now, what I would say, if you're interested in sports, here's a publication for you to check out. So if you have a piece of paper and a pen, you might note it down. If you have your phone there, just put it in your notes. There's a publication called the Sports Business Journal. I think it's a great publication for anybody who's interested in the world of sports business. So it's different. It's different than Sports Illustrated. It's different than ESPN. It's focused on sports business matters. And here is why I like it. It just gives you a much better background and understanding of ticketing, sponsorships, facilities, agents, you know, the impact of the pandemic on the operation of a sports organization. So when you come for an interview with me or anybody else, if you can say to me, you know, Jeff, I realized the pandemic had a really negative effect on the Ravens, but you know, I read an article in the Sports Business Journal that said that you used the first 10 rows of the stadium and you were able to put signage there, and you're able to generate revenue from that signage. That tells me that you're really interested in the world of sports business. You just don't know the statistics of the players, which is kind of a different element of the sports world, but you're kind of focused in the world of sports business. So that's one I would really say would be helpful. Another publication that a lot of the people in the NFL will read is called Pro Football Talk. You can get it, you know, look at it on the internet. It has lots of good information about the day-to-day activities of the NFL in particular. I'm a big reader of the Wall Street Journal. If you asked me when I was in college if I would be a reader of the Wall Street Journal, I would have said no. But I do. I'm an active reader of the Wall Street Journal. And the other thing I would say is let me say this. If you look at a front office directory of a professional franchise. So go to the website, and on the website for the NFL teams, you have to click on team. And then there's a sublink under there that would be front office or management or staff. And you can see all the jobs that are listed for that organization, and just look through them and decide like what interests me. Like when I think about my own skills and I'm looking through this list of job titles, what might be an interest that I might have? And if something appeals to you, then I would say, see if you can find like a person that has that job that could be a mentor for you where you could ask some questions like, how did you get to that job? How would you suggest I get to that job? But finding that person, and then don't be afraid to ask that person if you can call like quarterly or so, just for an update. Like right now, I'm mentoring students, and I'm sorry, I really can't take any more myself because I can barely keep up with the ones I currently have. But I'm happy to talk to them quarterly and just to give them feedback. Sometimes it's just a simple conversation. But don't be afraid to ask them to kind of continue that relationship, because it's great to get information kind of one time. But if you can have a repetitive conversation and continue to get information, that's even better. So I would say read, look at the front office directory of teams, and then see if you can find a mentor or two where you can have kind of a continuing ongoing relationship.
I think that's great advice, and it rolls right into my next question. So those students who you are mentoring right now have obviously done a great job at starting to build their network and build relationships with professionals in the industry. You know, when Nathan and I were in college, not too long ago, still a little while back, but that you talk about networking and building relationships, and that is such a point that's stressed on so much because of how important it is. Something I wish I did a little bit better when I was in school. But for somebody who is in that role in college and looking to maybe start their career soon, how important is it to kind of put yourself out there and start to build relationships and build your network, like those students who you are mentoring?
Yeah, I think it is important. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't great at it. I'm not sure I did a lot of networking. So you can succeed whether or not you're networking or not. I do think it's definitely helpful. Attending conferences like this or listening into all this information is helpful. The NFL just had a career symposium on women in the NFL. Being able to receive pieces of information like from that symposium or from a discussion like this, or gathering various pieces of, they're all going to be helpful. So any avenue you can take to improve your networking would be great. But I would say I think you can succeed without being an uber active networker, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's, it is important to build relationships, and it does help, get that career. You can tell within your career, you kind of indirectly touched on that, to where if you weren't helping with consulting and asking questions, there's a good chance, you're not the CFO for the Ravens right now. So I think that's very important. What were you, I got a note here that looks like we got a question on Facebook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it literally just, right on the other side of this wall. To Nathan, who's going to ask that question from one of our students that's tuning in today.
Yeah, Jake, we do have a question, and this is from a student named Ram, who attends the University of Illinois in Chicago. And their question is kind of simple, and they just kind of are curious, what's the day-to-day like working with the Ravens? And then are there certain times of the year that are more stressful for you as the CFO and overseeing, several different departments?
Okay, thank you for that question. That's great. So day to day for a CFO is relatively simple office type job. So if you think about working at a computer in an office, that's what I would be doing on a regular day. And my work hours are going to be pretty well set. So 9 a.m. to maybe 6 p.m. So I'm dealing with either spreadsheets, memos, meetings, those types of things. That's what I would be doing in the office as the chief financial officer. Seasonality, we do have some pretty significant seasonality. Right now is my busiest time of the entire year, which you may be thinking like, it's not football season. Why would you be so busy now? It's because we're preparing for the next football season. So we request our departments to submit a budget for this upcoming football season. Every department, sales department, equipment department, medical department, player personnel, coaching, scouting, all on the business departments too. Everybody's submitting budgets. And then we'll meet with every department. The president, me, and our finance staff will meet with each department and go through their budget and their plans for the year. So if some people ask me, like, what do you like about being the CFO? That's one of my favorite things. you have touch points with every single department within the organization, right? A lot of departments aren't going to have that kind of broad touch point with all the different departments within the organization. So that's what has us busy right now. In addition to that, we have tax returns that we have to prepare. So that's also in this same time frame. So as we prepare for this 2021 season, those things are happening right now. So I do want to kind of back up a little bit too, and just try to inform everybody kind of the structure of a sports franchise, just for some people who might not be aware. So if I think of a sports franchise, the kind of the organizational structure, think of football operations and business operations. And in some organizations, there's a really clear distinction. Some, there's not as clear distinction. Us at the Ravens, I think we have kind of a less clear separation between those two groups. Some NFL teams, though, it's possible that they may be in separate buildings. The football operations might be in one particular building. The business operations might be completely separate in a different building. So I think as a student, as you look through that front office directory, sometimes you have to think, do I want to be on the football side or the sports side? Because it may be the same with baseball and basketball and hockey and soccer or whatever. Do I want to be on that side? Or do I want to be on the business side? They each have their pros and cons. So if you think about the football side, let's just say a scout. You think, oh, that's great. That'd be great to be a scout. It is great. You're meeting with players, you're evaluating players, you're recording that into your player database, and eventually you're creating a list of players who you feel like you want to draft or you want to pursue as free agents. Downside might be if you are a scout that's covering the West Coast, you're not even in the Baltimore Ravens office on a regular basis. You're living out of your house and out of your car as you're traveling around to visit different scouts or different players, sorry. So there are pluses and minuses. CFO, one plus is my workday is a pretty regular workday. So at the end of my workday, I can come home to my family here in Baltimore. I can coach my son's baseball team or my daughter's softball team, whatever the case is. But I don't really have that much interaction with players. So there are pros and cons on both the football side and the business side. And once you select a side, you can always try to kind of go from one side to another. So it's not uncommon to go. So it's not like you're locked in or anything like that. But I think it's important to kind of know that general structure. So anyway, I do have additional like practical tips for anybody who's interested in like accounting and then IT and HR. We can save those, Nathan and Jake, until later, or I can just keep rolling and mention some of those, whatever you'd like for me to do.
I think we'll come to those here in a second because one, I think I can just hear the wisdom as you talk and you're just outlining, the difference between the football side and the business side. And I'm thinking back when I was a student a couple of years ago, like just that understanding is so valuable to have. But being here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we've got it queued up and ready to go. We love sending out to the museum because that's our greatest resource. That's why people come to Canton, Ohio, to see the museum. And we've got a member of our team, Kara Kwasinski, standing in front of an artifact that is pretty unique for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So Kara, are you there?
Hey, Nathan, I'm here.
Awesome. We can hear you. Go for it.
Awesome. Great. Well, welcome everybody to the Pro Football Hall of Fame's first floor rotunda, where we celebrate the first 100 years of pro football. And today I'm standing in front of something that is actually more than 100 years old because it goes back to 1892. It is pretty relevant item to our special guest though, because it's accounting and finance. You see, this is an accounting ledger from the Allegheny Athletic Club, and it serves as the birth certificate of professional football because on it is documented the $500 payment to a man named William Pudge Heffelfiger for a game performance bonus. The cost was worth it though, because the Allegheny Athletic Club beat their rivals, the Pittsburgh Athletic Club, and Heffelfinger scored the game's only touchdown. So this might be the only artifact we have related to accounting, but it's a pretty significant one. And we know the game has changed a lot since this very moment. But how has it changed since you started working in the industry?
Oh, Kara, that's a great artifact. I love that. You totally, you totally did better than what I could do, because I have some financial statements from like 1959, which I thought was great, but that's nothing compared to what you have. That's fantastic. I don't know, how's the game changed? The NFL game has changed pretty dramatically. The one area that I really feel the best about as far as how the game has changed, it's become safer. The NFL has been very focused on making it safer for the players. When you work at a team, I feel like you do see the players. Like, I don't interact with them on a daily basis, but I'm in the same building with them. They eat in the cafeteria, at one time for 1 hour, and then the staff eats in the next hour, for example. I see them, they're people, they're regular people. So you want them to stay safe. To me, it's a game. You want them to be safe. It's entertainment to the fans, but you do want the players to be safe. So I am thankful that the game itself has become safer from the player standpoint.
Definitely. I can tell it changed a lot in that way too. But I know here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, our archivist would love to see your files from back in the day. But I'm going to take it and I'm going to throw it back to Jake and Nathan in the studio.
All right, thanks, Kara. Thanks so much for giving us an inside look at the Pro Football Hall of Fame there. And you mentioned, Jeff, how much the game has changed, and it was really tell there, because that wasn't the typical uniform you see in today's game in that display case as well. And I want to touch on, because you talked a lot about tips and tricks. You've mentioned it a few times there. What were some recommendations that you would give to people looking to get into your career? We talk so much about, hey, you got to have this on your resume, or you need to highlight this, but specifically looking at, finance, accounting, HR, IT, what are some of those, if you could sum up maybe 2 or 3 really good things that they need to have, or recommendations you would have to set them apart from others?
Okay, yeah. So here are a few thoughts. Let me just start a little bit with diversity. So I think all the students, you probably know that companies across the country, including NFL teams, sports franchises, leagues, there is this big push towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI, you'll sometimes hear. So it's important. And I mention it because if you're interested in the field of DEI, it's exploding. So if you want to be a consultant who can help teams with their DEI concepts, then that would be great. So DEI basically is making sure that the opportunities for people of color or minorities or women are available just like they would be for non-minorities. Promotions, compensation, job interviews. I would say to the ladies listening in, there are opportunities in the world of professional football for you. I just listened to a conference for women in the NFL, and there were 4 coaches who presented. They were terrific. They were on-field coaches. They were fantastic. Also on that seminar was the commissioner of the NFL, plus head coaches in the NFL, plus general managers of the NFL and owners. So the 2 female owners, one for the Browns and one for the Detroit Lions, they were on, and all of them are supporting the concept of opportunities for women, not only in the business operation side, but on the football operation side. So if you think about the characteristics of a coach, like what would you be looking for in a coach? You're looking for someone who's smart, passionate, tough, gritty, a good teacher, a good analyst. All those characteristics they're not gender specific. So females can do those just as well as males can do them. So I just want to make sure I take a moment to encourage the women on the call to pursue jobs, if you'd like, in either the business or the football side of sports organizations. Okay, so accounting. So those of you who are interested in accounting, here are some thoughts for you. When you come out of college, you can typically either go to a public accounting firm or a private accounting firm. So I went to a public accounting firm. Again, you're servicing clients and making sure their books and records are accurate, or you're doing tax returns, or you're working as a consultant. Okay. So you can take that route and then move over to professional team, or you can try to start with an entry level position at a professional team, maybe in accounts payable, somewhere in the accounting department. Okay, so those are two options. Either one of them would work. Sometimes I'll get the question, which one's better than the other? Either one will work. For folks who are interested in finance or economics, so if you're interested in that, here are some thoughts for you. Typically, I don't see those backgrounds as frequently in a finance department, because the finance department is more technical. You have to prepare financial statements, you have to do tax returns, you have to have the technical experience for that job. You who are in economics and finance, there may be another spot at a professional team. Maybe it's in the sales department, would be a slot that you might be interested in. It could be outside the team. You can still be involved in sports and not be part of a team. For example, a banker. Like just yesterday, the NFL came out and said 2 years ago it made $16 billion, the entire league. Last year with the pandemic, it was $12 billion. So they lost $4 billion. So when teams and leagues lose that much money, bankers need to step in and offer loans to them. So if you're interested in economics and finance, maybe banking, sports lending might be an option for you. There's entities that are specific to sports lending. So that might be a good option. Here's another one for you. Legalized sports betting. Big industry. I'm in Maryland. It's not allowed in Maryland currently. Legislation should be passed here shortly where it is allowed, but it's an exploding field. If you're good at, math, or you're interested in economics, finance, supply, demand, setting odds, then that could be a spot where you could be. If there's not only going to be sports betting lounges, but there's going to be media, there's going to be shows, TV shows, podcasts, all on sports betting. Big new field, exploding field. Some states are further along than others, but that might be an interest for someone who has kind of an accounting or a finance or economics interest. Okay, here's another one for you. For those of you on the call who might be interested in analytics, another big time exploding field. Analytics, both on the business side and on the football side. So you might wonder, okay, well, what do you mean by analytics? Okay, so at the Ravens, we would have coaching analytics, scouting analytics, and performance analytics. So I can give you an example, like performance analytics, you have sensors on shoulder pads. So it tracks the movement of every player. You can track the speed, and the kind of the wear and tear on a particular player, on how much that physical exertion that player has exerted maybe during a practice or a game. Basketball has, I think, a lot of things that, you can have the shot trackers, measure the arc of the shot. Again, the movement of players on a field. So big exploding field. If you're interested in analytics, you're going to be in high demand. Business analytics too. So for example, we'll look at our ticket sales, and you look at it for every section of the stadium and find out how many people renewed their tickets for each section of the stadium. And so that involves these analytics, crunching numbers to make those determinations that help guide the business. So if you're interested in analytics, you're in a great spot. So let me hit just a couple of other quick ones, and then we can move on to maybe another topic. But IT, I just wanted to mention too, for any of you students who are interested in IT, IT it's kind of connected with analytics. So anybody who's good with databases, you're going to be in demand too, because all these analytical systems, they take tons of data and then they try to merge it together and draw conclusions. So they may be taking data from Pro Football Focus or College Football Focus and putting it into a giant database with a bunch of other variables. but it requires someone with IT background to manage the database and make sure the database is clean. So if you're interested in databases from an IT perspective, that would be a match. Another one I'd mention, IT security. Companies across the country are facing IT security problems. There's been hacks, data has been leaked, and if your data gets leaked, then you're facing legal issues and a lot of cost to remedy that leak. So if you're interested in IT security, there are teams that have dedicated individuals, dedicated employees just to IT security. HR, if you're interested in HR, it's a pretty clean path. Hiring, training, employee benefits, retirement benefits, that's kind of your standard HR that we have. So sorry, that might have been a little long-winded, but I wanted to make sure to try to give some tips to kind of different groups of, or different levels of interest or different areas.
No, that's great, because that's why that's why we do this every Friday, is to showcase just how many different careers there are. So for everybody watching, if you learned about one of those careers that you had no idea about, I want you to just give us a thumbs up, give us a like on the post today, or comment and say, hey, this is one I learned about, just to showcase that, there are so many jobs out there, and they're all great ones. No matter what you do, if you have a passion for it, you never work a day in your life. And working in sports obviously comes with some pretty cool benefits. So we've talked a lot about, in the office, but, being with an organization for as long as you have, you've got to see some pretty cool things as being a member of the Ravens. So put a little pressure on you here. If you had to pick one moment that you've got to be a part of because of your career in sports, I assume I know the answer to this, but what would that one moment be that you got to be a part of, that you look back and you go, I can't believe I was there?
I have three that come to mind. I'm not going to share all three because it'll take too much time. One didn't even have to do with American football. It had to do with a soccer match that we had at the football stadium. And I got a chance to meet my childhood soccer hero, not American football. I won't even tell the story. So, but you're right. I think where you're headed, the Ravens have won 2 Super Bowls. I was a member of the organization for both times. The second one in the 2012 season really probably meant more to me. I'd been a member of the organization for a longer period of time. At that point, kind of played a little more of a contributor role. And so being at that game, and of course, being able to go on the field after we had won the Super Bowl, that's probably the one that really sticks out to me as my best memory.
As long as you didn't knock the lights out. As long as you didn't knock the lights
We won despite the lights going out. That's right.
All right, I'm going to throw it back to Nathan, who's got some other questions. And I think I was kind of peeking, got a sneak peek at some very time relevant questions for where we're at right now in the NFL season. So I'm going to throw it back to Nathan for those.
Yeah, so the first question I got, because we do have a couple and I want to try to get to them all, is from Adam. He attends Fordham, and it's a simple question, and he's just curious, does the player salary cap, because we see the NFL just announced the player salary cap that's going to be used this upcoming season, does that impact you and your job at all? Like, are you going to have a job even? That's kind of like, he's just curious, how does the player salary cap impact you on the business side?
No, that's a very good question. So thank you for that. When I think of the player salary cap, I typically think of our executives who are negotiating the contracts with the players. So the players are unionized, as I think most people may know, and there's a collective bargaining agreement that dictates the terms and conditions of employment. So basically a contract that says how the players get paid, when they have to practice, games, those types of things. So the contract negotiation is not something that the CFO does. But when it comes to needing to know the collective bargaining agreement, other than the general manager and the like our executive vice president of football operations, the one who does the contract negotiations, the CFO is right there closest in terms of needing to know the collective bargaining agreement and how the players are paid. So when you think about the salary cap itself, that indicates, or that limits how much you can pay the players. So we have an audit. Our finance department goes through an audit that will look to see how much did you pay the players And was it in accordance with the terms of the collective bargaining agreement? Were you in compliance with the CBA and the salary cap? But also, that audit is compiling the total revenues that we generated. And they'll take our revenues, combine it with the 31 other teams, and come up with a giant pool of revenue. And that will dictate what the salary cap is for the next season. So the finance department and the CFO are definitely involved with the salary cap, even though I'm not negotiating the player contracts.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of information. It kind of provides a fuller understanding of kind of how that works. I've got two more questions. I know we're running short on time. I'm looking over here at the clock. So I'm going to combine them together. I know you're not really supposed to do that in interviews, but I think they're both valuable and they kind of do go in line. And the first is from a gentleman by the name of Rick Smith. He's a professor at Marietta College. I've actually got a younger brother that's on the football team down there. So shout out to the Pioneers and Marietta College. But Professor Smith, he says, in your experience, you've probably looked at hundreds of resumes, maybe even thousands, and you get stacks of them. And he says, we teach our students, how to network and but what can make your resume stick out so that when you're just going through this stack of resumes, it doesn't get moved over to the no pile, and it gets moved over to the pile where, okay, we need to take a deeper look at this. And then the other part of the question is from Gabe. He's a student at Georgia State. And he says, are a lot of these hires in the NFL because of a relationship with someone or a referral? Or can you just go into that pile of hundreds of resumes and get hired in that way through the application process?
Okay, so good. Both of those are good questions too. On the kind of what makes a resume stand out, it needs to be clean, organized. Honestly, to me, when I look through a resume, the one thing that's going to probably catch my eye the most is going to be some kind of experience related to sports. So if you don't have it on your resume, you need to kind of figure out, well, how do I get it? Like when I was referring back when I was a young professional, I worked in public accounting. I had accounting experience on my resume, but I didn't have sports. So somehow I had to figure out how to get it. So I went back to grad school to get it. So that might be an option for you. Another option might be to volunteer at some organization that's sports related, or somehow try to get some sports experience on your resume, because I think that would help differentiate it from one that doesn't have sports. So that, and I guess that would be my one comment on the resume. When it comes to hiring, new employees, if you ask me, like, what's the number one thing that dictates success in an organization? I think it's hiring the best people. It's the number one thing. And so we are always looking to cast a wide net to get the most candidates possible and to look through those candidates and pick the very best candidates. So we're very reluctant to select candidates based on existing relationships, unless that is the best candidate. But I want to make sure that I've looked at enough candidates to make sure that's the best candidate before I'm going with someone that has kind of some previous relationship with us. There is a rule that some of you may be familiar with in the NFL. It's called the Rooney Rule. And it means for your highest level executives on the football side, GM, coach, but also now on the business side, that teams are required to perform a search and make sure they interview and consider candidates, minority candidates, just to make sure that there's kind of equal opportunity for those types of jobs. So the jobs that are given to folks who have kind of some existing relationship with the team, those I think are kind of declining, and there's more of a more thorough job search that's happening these days.
Yeah, I think you answered both of those really, really well. And it's encouraging because I think some students might be sitting there and be like, I don't know anybody. Do I really have a chance? But like you said, all organizations are going to be best off if they hire the best people. And I think everyone can agree on that. And I know we're getting close to the end, so I think this is my last time I'm going to get to talk to you. So I just wanted to thank you again, Mr. Goering, for joining us and answering these questions. But I know Jake has at least one or two more he wants to ask before we close today. So thanks again.
Sure.
All right, thanks, Nathan. Yeah, great question. I think the salary cap question was very cool because it's such a time relevant thing. And, you look at the pandemic causing, the salary cap to drop because you mentioned that, up top, the NFL lost. And it's just that trickle down effect to where it truly does affect, the guy or the gal who's working in accounting, keeping the books. That affects the players and the coaches just as much as it affects, the business side of things. So I thought that was really cool. And I'm glad we got that question covered. What we're going to do now is we're going to wrap everything up with our last question. And this, if you've seen us before, we ask this question at the end of pretty much every program we do here, just because it's a great way to kind of sum everything up and leave everybody with that one final nugget of information. And you've given so much great advice. As Nathan said, I'll echo that. I can tell there's a lot of wisdom in what you're talking about. But if you could leave everybody who's tuned in today, whether they're high school, college, young professionals, even Nathan and I, what is that one piece of information you want everybody to walk away with today?
Wow, I think I could come up with a variety of ones, but I think I would say persistence. Be persistent, it may seem intimidating. You're listening to a person who grew up on a farm in central Kansas, about as far away as possible from being the Baltimore Ravens CFO. And that's not the greatest job on earth. There's better jobs than my job, but still, for me to go to that spot, if I can do this, you can definitely do it. And Jake, I think maybe you mentioned it earlier, a career path isn't always going to be a straight line. I kind of think of it as think of a running back running for a touchdown. Sometimes it is a straight line. The back gets the handoff, there's a wide open hole, the guy takes off and he's straight to the end zone. So it can happen that way. But there's a lot of times where a back is running one direction, has to cut back, go a different way, cut back, sometimes even reversing field, like losing ground and going all the way back and running for a touchdown. I kind of think that's way is somewhat relevant or similar to a career path. If I'm in college right now, I kind of figure like, what seems interesting to me? I'm going to pursue that career path. After a couple of years, I reevaluate and like, maybe I'm going to change a little bit. That's fine. It's okay. Make a change, try to go that way for a little bit, and then stop and reevaluate again, and just kind of be persistent in trying to continue to move up the career ladder. And eventually, I think over time, you do hit the end zone. It may be take a little longer, but you can definitely make it there. So I just would encourage like all the students to be persistent, and you could definitely have success.
Well, that is an awesome analogy. One I don't think I have ever heard before, and a great way to wrap up today's program in this edition of the Before the Snap series. So, Mr. Goering, thank you so much for being a part of the program today. As I said at the beginning, the ball just doesn't kick off on Sunday because it's Sunday at 1:00. There's so much work that goes into making the game as great as it can be and what we enjoy watching on TV. So thank you so much for everything you do for the game of football, everything you do for the Baltimore Ravens organization, and truly everything you do for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. If you know it or not, we talked about the trickle down effect, but everything affects everything in some way. So we thank you for everything that we do. And before we leave you, everybody, today, just some quick announcements. Make sure you're tuning in to all of our social media channels, whether it be the Baltimore Ravens or us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. As Mr. Goering said, it isn't the football season, but there's still so much great content coming out about your teams. The draft is coming up. We're at cut week. So all these big news stories are coming out. So make sure you stay tuned for all those, stay up to date with all the great football news that's in and around the NFL. For us here at the Hall of Fame, we just launched a new Facebook premiere series called Heart of a Hall of Famer, powered by our great partners at Extreme Network. So every Thursday at 11:30, right here on the Hall of Fame's Facebook page, tune in and you'll see a nice, short, condensed version of our Heart of a Hall of Famer program. Then learn about how the character values are so important in the game of football and for our Heart of a Hall of Famers. If you're a podcast listener, we've got a great podcast here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame hosted by my great friend, coworker, Jameer Howerton, where he's interviewing players, Gold Jackets, media members, authors, members of the community about the game of football and the great values that it has. For before the snap next week, we are fortunate to have Austin Pasco from the New Orleans Saints, who's their youth programs manager, who's going to be with us right here at 12 noon Eastern time to talk about his career in and around the NFL. And his job is pretty cool because he actually gets to work a little bit in the basketball world too. So we'll talk about him. I'm sure Zion Williamson's going to come up in the conversation, and we'll talk about all the great people there in New Orleans as well. Like I said at the beginning, you know, there's so much work that goes into making sure that that ball can kick off, so much work before the snap. So again, Jeff, thank you so much for being a part of the program today. And thank you for everything that you do for this great game.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
For everybody that tuned in today, thank you so much. And we'll see you here live next week on the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Facebook page for our Before the Snap series. Thank you, everybody.